Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today, we're going to be putting together a small form factor gaming PC that's capable of basically playing anything at 1440p. And this thing isn't going to break the bank because we're actually going to be utilizing a lot of used parts from eBay. Some of the stuff is new, and I would recommend buying like new storage and new RAM. It's relatively cheap because we're not going to go with super high end stuff to get this put together. But throughout the video, I'm going to go over all the parts I used here, a few different options that you could go with if you don't want to go with the combo that we have here. But so far, this thing has been performing absolutely amazing, and I do think that it's a pretty good combination that we've got here. In this video, I've got a lot to go over and a lot to test, but before we get started, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by URCD Keys. I've been using this site for quite some time now. They offer Steam keys, Uplay, Ubisoft, but the main thing I pick up over here are Windows 11 Pro keys. And right now, if you use code ETA, you can get 25% off. So at checkout, we'll just enter the code ETA. That's going to bring the price down to $22.88. They're going to email you that key, and then you can activate Windows. Speaking of that, let's head over to a new PC that I recently built. As you can see, we're running Windows 11, and from Settings, we're going to go to Activation Settings. It's going to tell us that we're not active. We don't have a key installed, so we're just going to paste it right in here, choose Next. It's going to activate Windows for us, and we're ready to go. If you're in need of cheap Windows keys, I'll leave a link in the description. And remember, you can use code ETA for 25% off. Getting right into the build, starting out here with motherboard and CPU. What I've got here is an Asus B560 motherboard. It's actually the Prime B560 MAC, so it does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in. I got this with the CPU we're going to be using here for $175 shipped on eBay. I've seen some with i3s. I've also seen some with i7s. i3s will come in a bit cheaper. I've seen them for around 130. i7s are going to be a bit more. But what we've got here is the i5 11400F. 6 cores, 12 threads. And to tell you the truth, it wasn't listed with the cooler, and it's a lower end cooler. I mean, it's a stock Intel cooler, but we did get it with the board, so I'm pretty happy about that. When it comes to storage, it's really up to you. You can get an M.2 or you could use a SATA drive. I've got a cheaper 512 gigabyte drive here that I'm going to be using. It's a Western Digital Blue. And as for RAM, since we're using a B550 chipset, it utilizes DDR4. Right now, over on Amazon, you can get this same RAM, 16 gigs at 3200 megahertz for $27 ship. You could go all out and do a 32 gig setup if you wanted to, but I think 16 is going to be sufficient for what we want to do here. And of course, we wanted to keep it as cheap as possible. Speaking of cheap, I love these small form factor inexpensive cases that you can get on Amazon. This is just an all steel case. We've got a mesh front panel. It's a newer one that popped up for me. It's actually $38 and it supports mini ITX or micro ATX. And yeah, I do consider this a small form factor case. It's very similar to one that I used about 2 weeks ago in a build, but instead of using an SFX power supply, this actually uses a full-size ATX power supply. And of course, we've got those fans up front. Comes with this mounting bracket for them, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use this with the GPU installed. I may have to mount them a bit differently, but either way you look at it, I mean, for 38 bucks, it's hard to beat something like this, especially when small form factor cases are going for like $200. And yeah, those definitely go all out, but this is really all you need. Got a couple extra mounting spots in the bottom for extra fans, and that mesh up front is going to allow a lot of airflow. We'll go ahead and slam this board in here. I've already installed the rear IO plate, and yeah, it does fit. Micro ATX, even used, is a bit cheaper nowadays. Mini ITX, if you wanted to splurge, you could definitely use that with a case like this. But the price difference I've been seeing, even for used boards, is around 40 bucks. So if you wanted to save that up front, you could definitely go with a board like this. And originally, when I purchased this case, I was actually under the impression that it used an SFX power supply, just given the size of it. And we could definitely use something like this with a bracket. The APEVA SFX power supplies are pretty cheap, but an ATX is also pretty cheap when you're only going up to around 550 watts. But the downside is if you don't go modular, you've got a ton of cables to mess around with. And I personally don't like doing this, but for the build here to save that money, I can definitely make this work. And by the way, this is a Thermaltake Smart BX1 550. For the CPU and GPU that we're going to be using here, 550 watts is going to be more than enough. I need to get this installed and get all those cables tied up. I think I can make it look pretty decent. It's not as clean as I would like, but it actually tucked up in the top pretty nicely. Using a modular would be the way to go, but you will spend a bit more doing it that way. I'll try to clean up the cabling a little more once I get the GPU installed, but that's the next thing we need to talk about here. There's a few different choices, and with this case, we are a bit limited. With the fans removed from the front, we can fit up to a 250 millimeter GPU, and for this, I'm going to be going with an Intel ARC B570. The ASRock Challenger version that I have here is readily available over on Newegg. They're around 270, so they're a little more than we initially thought the B570s would launch at. But if you take a look over on eBay, some people are trying to scalp these for like 350 bucks. So I would try to get one new for sure from Newegg. But this will allow for 1440p gaming. We've got 10 gigs of VRAM, and it does fit inside of this case, believe it or not. You will have to kind of snake it in there at an angle, and for this setup, I did have to remove the RAM in order to get this installed. Single 8-pin PCIe power connector, and this card here has a maximum TGP of 150 watts. I don't think it's going to be pulling that much. I think we're going to be up to around 120, and the 11400F that we have here, totally maxed out, pulls like 130, and that's not while gaming. I'd say around 80 to 90 while gaming. So 550 watt power supply like we have here will be sufficient. With this fan bracket the case came with, I'm not going to be able to put these fans back in, but if I remove them from the bracket, I think I can get them to fit up front. Okay, so I was actually able to get the fans in there. Not sure how I feel about them. I'm not a huge fan of RGB, but having a little extra airflow here for the same price the case was, I'll just use them for now. I could always upgrade them down the road. So yeah, it actually turned out pretty nicely. There is a little bit of RGB on that ASRock B570, and of course, we've got those funky RGB fans that are non-controllable up front. The RGB is just going to be on for now, but I can deal with it as long as it keeps everything nice and chilly. Before we get into testing, wanted to give you a look at a few things. As you can see, we've got that Intel i5-11400F, just 6 cores, 12 threads, nothing special here. And I've done a little bit of TDP testing. We are up to around 90 watts while gaming with it. 16 gigs of DDR4 at 3200, and this board will support up to 5000 megahertz overclock DDR4, but given that this is $28 RAM, I'm going to leave it just where it is. And of course, we've got that Intel ARC B570 with 10 gigs of VRAM. One important note here, make sure resizable bar is enabled from the BIOS, and this board already came with it turned on, but you can check the Intel graphics software, shows that resizable bar is enabled. There's one thing I always like to do, and that's up the power limit on these ARC cards, just so we can get a little bit of a higher clock. ASRock states that this clock will go up to 2600. If I take the power limit up to 112, this will clock up to 2750. Now it's time to get into some gaming, and I will move over to my game capture in just a second, but the first game we have is God of War Ragnarok. We're at 1440p high settings with XeSS set to balanced. We're seeing an average of around 72 FPS, and you can definitely get more out of it by going down to medium settings or even taking XeSS to performance. Another thing you could do here is enable frame gen, but unfortunately we don't have XeSS2 frame gen yet for this game. We'd have to use FSR frame gen, but the way it's set up right now, I think it's playing just fine. You know I had to test out Forza Horizon 5, and right now we're at 1440p ultra settings with no scaling, so we're not using FSR or XeSS here. We're getting over 100 FPS on average, and I knew with that B570 we'd be able to reach these kind of frame rates. It looks really great here at 1440, and it's playing absolutely amazingly. Moving over to my game capture so we can get a better look at everything. Cyberpunk 2077, we're at high settings, 1440p. And I'm using the high preset, so XeSS does turn on and it goes directly to quality. So just to show you, high settings, XeSS quality, 1440. And I did try this at ultra settings with XeSS set to quality. We saw an average of around 63, but I'm sure there would be some cases where it would drop down. In order to go up to ultra with it and get the kind of frame rate we're seeing here, which just happens to be around 84 FPS on average, we'd have to take XeSS to balanced, and I wanted to leave it at quality. It still looks great here, and it's playing just fine on this system. Borderlands 3 Ultra 1440p got a lot of hiccups, and with most systems recently, I've been seeing these hiccups at these kind of settings. Even on a new NVIDIA 5000 series card, you can see it dips down right there. It really feels like it just doesn't know what to do with shader cache, and I kind of wish that before we started the game we had a little bit of caching going on, because I think that's exactly what's happening here. And it doesn't matter, I could be on NVIDIA, Intel, or AMD. Here's Marvel Rivals, 1440p, ultra settings, and I actually didn't expect the B570 to give us over 100 FPS on average, and this is without even using the XeSS frame gen. With that enabled, we're up in the 140s with it. Not quite doubling the frame rate, but we don't even need it here if you don't mind playing this at over 100 FPS. I mean, it's plenty if you ask me. And finally, Doom Dark Ages. I really wanted to see how the B570 handled this, and I do think that with a more powerful CPU, we could see a higher frame rate. But right now, it looks great. High settings, 1440p with XeSS set to balanced. Overall, not a bad little setup, and I really do like this case. I don't like the RGB fans up front. Just putting some black fans in there would be really nice just to get some airflow through there. But for 38 bucks on the case itself, it's really hard to beat something like this. It is small form factor. And another great choice for a GPU in this build would be an RX 660 used from eBay, the non-XT variant. About a month ago, I picked one up for 130, and I've seen them for 130 to 160. It really depends on who's selling it. That would also offer some really good performance, but it's not going to be as powerful as this B570. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you're interested in putting something like this together, I'll leave links in the description to everything I used. And if there's anything else you want to see running on this rig, just let me know in the comments. And like always, thanks for watching.